Wow, everybody got quiet. That's great. I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:03 p.m. We'll now take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll have the coordinator call the roll at this time.
Ms. Jackson? Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Dr. Harner?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mrs. Powers?
Here.
With 7 present, 1 via phone, we have a quorum.
All right. I'm supposed to be able to read that?
Want me to
Okay.
read it?
May I have a motion and a second to allow Board Member Jackson to participate by phone as she is ill this evening?
So moved.
Moved. Second? Do we need a roll call or just all in favor? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. We do not have any media students tonight helping us. And if there are no objections, in order to accommodate our guests, the Community Foundation will, I'd like to change the order of our agenda to consider this first action item, the acceptance of the Community Foundation $20,000 grant for robotics. So do I need a motion for that?
Motion to change it, right?
I need a-
So moved.
Not a
just
motion to change the agenda, the motion.
to accept.
It's not even to accept, it's just if you oppose it, then you would say something.
All right. Any opposition? If not, we'll move ahead with that item. Is there, so it says right here, I need an acceptance of a motion and a second to approve the acceptance of the Community Foundation $20,000 grant for robotics.
So moved.
By Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Rollins. If there are any questions or discussion, now I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the Community Foundation grant.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Mr. Earl Dotson, are you handling this?
Yes, sir.
All righty, okay. Earl Dotson Jr.
Good evening and thank you. And so since we've had that motion approved and passed, we will go ahead first and recognize the robotics team and have that presentation. First up, we will have some remarks from Addie Longberry. Addie?
Well, on behalf of everyone working with the RPS rollout, we would really like to thank the Community Foundation for everything they've done. As everyone knows, the RPS rollout is instilling a robotics team in all the public schools, K through 12. The speed of this rollout really depends on sponsorship and grant funds from organizations like the Community Foundation. This year, all 5 public high schools will have an FTC team, with Jefferson being in their 2nd year. We are planning on having 8 LEGO League teams in the middle and elementary schools, with both Lincoln and Marshalls having 2 teams each. Actually, the FTC and FLL seasons start next week. next week. On September 6th, Rockford Robotics and the Rockford Makers Network are partnering in throwing a kickoff event at the Discovery Center September 6th, so everyone come on down and check that out. The number of junior FLL teams, K through 3, have not been confirmed yet this year because their season starts later on. However, there are still plenty of time to add teams. So, thank you, everyone.
So we have members of the robotics team here this evening. Would you all please stand so we can recognize you? Next, we have a check presentation from Gloria Lundin from the Community Foundation.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I first of all want to say that I was here a few months ago, and well, actually, it was almost a year ago, wasn't it? And I was sitting here or standing here and presenting the idea of the Bandwagon 2 initiative, and to look at all of you and see smiles and approval and be a part of that made the foundation feel really good, and I think the schools too. The first thing I want to say is I want to commend the Rockford Robotics group. I told them that they wrote a very nice grant, and that isn't always the case when we're receiving grants from the public, but they did a wonderful job, and I know Abby had something to do with it. They have enthusiasm, kids have enthusiasm, and for them to bring their talents and expertise to the Rockford Public Schools is pretty cool. Second thing is we all know that learning is fun. It should be fun. And I think, again, looking at their faces, they're going to instill that fun in the public schools and carry on what you're wanting to do, Dr. Jarrett. The third thing I want to say is the fact is that what we're doing is win-win-winning. We're winning for our public school system, we're winning for our kids and our community, and I applaud you for being a part of it. And then, as Abby has said, it's for 5-year-olds through 18-year-olds. And that is amazing. So I am very excited for the Community Foundation to present you, Ken, with $20,000.
You want me to come out there?
See, we're short.
Yeah, we should get the kids in the background.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
This year, you guys.
Congratulations.
You guys pushing the ball around too with your robots? Yeah. Yeah. Well, you guys were out at Rockdale. Fantastic. Yeah.
All right, ready? Wonderful.
Washington Academy 5th grader Kodai Spike won the Boone Winnebago Regional Spelling Bee and went to Washington, D.C. to represent the region in the 2014 Scripps National Spelling Bee. While he didn't make it to the semifinals, the 10-year-old did a fantastic job representing Rockford. Kodai correctly answered his 2 vocabulary words and also correctly spelled Edelweiss and preponderance. We hope to see Kodai in Washington again. Congratulations to Kodai's parents and to his teacher, Ms. Christine Flatt, and his principal, who is here with him this evening as well, Mr. Jim Parker, who were instrumental in establishing a spelling club at Washington Academy. Please, let's congratulate this young man on his fine accomplishment. Anybody want to try Edelweiss?
You did nice. EDEL. I think that's right. Mrs. Holy gets the cookie because she's just spelled it. Every morning you greet. Yeah.
Or Carrie
Sound of Music, right?
or Carrie Underwood.
Thank you, sir. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Dotson Jr., Earl Dotson Jr. All right, we are now on to the petitions and communications portion of our meeting when we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communication portion of our agenda. According to Board Policy 2.230, the public comments portion is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. In order to allow sufficient time for the business of the board and to conduct our meetings in an efficient and effective manner, we are requesting that you comply with the guidelines that are posted and that each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. And we have 3 speakers tonight. It's not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such open meetings. And I will call 2 names at once, and please come to the front. We have the clocks on the wall to help you with the timing. So our first speaker tonight is Allison Wang, to be followed by Reverend Anthony Greer. Allison Wang.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Political scientist Howard Laswell once wrote that politics is about who gets what, when, and how. So I would just like to start with telling a little history lesson. Back in 1896, the city of St. Louis became tired of providing services to outlying areas. So the city decided to separate itself off of the St. Louis County. This left a ring of mostly middle-class suburbs around an area stricken by poverty. Since then, minorities have started moving out of the inner city for suburbs such as Ferguson. Ferguson's demographics have changed rapidly over the years. In 1990, it was 74% white and 25% minority. In 2000, 52% minority and 45% white. By 2010, 67% minority and 29% white. Now, when we look at the current Ferguson School Board, we find 6 white board members and 1 Hispanic. I think that we can all see the obvious similarities between Ferguson and RPS 205. But if we do put away all these demographics, we can ask a scientific question of who gets what, when, and how. And I hope that in your focus, the only who that you're concerned with are the students, which I do agree that you're trying to focus more on, as we could see with the spelling bee and the robotics team, which I really do appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Anthony Greer, to be followed by Kate Schnell.
Good evening. Once again, I'm back down talking in regards to the behavior and the unfair hiring and firing practices of this district. And I have several questions and one concern. First, does it concern you that our percentage of retaining African Americans at 17% here in this district over the last 10 years? But the first question I have for you is, how many African Americans, head and assistants, have we hired for this new school year? Second question is, we're asking basically for you to reassign Reuben Cooper to an assistant principal or head principal position, as well as bringing Roy Ford back to his assigned position. Also, are the mentors for the principals that we have in place now, are they helpful, or are they there to cutthroat those that are not fitting the model? Fourthly, how many African American teachers have we tried or do we have in place for this year throughout the district? Number 5, when will the diversity plan be given to the community and who's heading it? Number 6, The question I have also is, do all the administrators have a 6-month turnaround such as Reuben Cooper did when he was at Lewis Lemon? And lastly, when will our leader get his hands dirty in this community and show that he's here for all the kids and not just the kids that are affiliated with his children? Thank you. Good night.
Kate Schnell.
Well, it's been a marathon. It's been quite a ride, and I'm so grateful for those boys that have graduated, and they're off to college. Knock on wood, stay there, please. I learned something from these kids, from these athletes, football, basketball players, the boys. I'm going to stick with the boys because that's what I dealt with. They're just as good athletically as the other kids in the private schools. The problem is they can't read. I was so focused on making sure that they took the right classes for the NCAA requirements, make sure they're in the rigorous math and science classes, you know, the biology, the sequence biology, chemistry, physics, the algebra, geometry, algebra 2, algebra 3, trig, stats. I thought that English, well, you have it every year, you know, it takes care of itself. The kids, their grades are great, you know. And I reflect back on when Phil's older brother in 2002 was in 6th grade and he couldn't read that dang science book enough to even study. And I talked to the teacher, Mr. Z, and he goes, "Oh my God, I can't teach these kids how to read. I teach science." So I verbalize, I demonstrate whatever I can do, you know, so they can learn science. And our kids are so smart that if they don't grasp reading by the 3rd grade, they don't like it. It's a chore. I hate it. And it's like Pavlovian. They get the teachers to verbalize to them, and they verbalize all through middle school and all through high school. And I'm hoping that I'd like to come back to more meetings and let's figure out how we can get our kids so they can read. So on that ACT score, they can get above an 18.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay.
Are there any board member comments at this time? Mr. Connor.
So I believe this is correct, Mr. Schmidt. Is the dance studio open this fall? The revised one at Auburn?
Yes, it's open right now. We're just waiting on the new dance floor to put in there.
Okay. So I want to commend Mr. Schmidt and his staff. This last year, we met with the Kappa teachers, and their number one priority was to take a part of the revised area at Auburn and have the dance studio close to the rest of Kappa. So I want to thank Mr. Schmidt and his staff for working very closely with the Kappa group, and a really good dance studio is now open through their efforts and the cooperation with the Kappa teachers. So really want to commend them for that.
Any other board member comments? Seeing none, we will now move to the consent portion of our agenda, which includes the following: the meeting minutes of August 16th and August 12th of 2014, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, contracts under $10,000, purchase orders Auburn High School tennis court refurbishment and travel, and the following recurring contracts, and bear with me, this is a long list. Northwestern Illinois Association fiscal year 14 ADA assessment fee, and the fiscal year 15 Northwestern NIA contract, and the following list of special education private and residential placement schools contracts, which include the following schools: Allendale, Barbara Olson Center of Hope, Boys Town, Camelot Therapeutic Day School, Clay Therapeutic Day School, Dolan Education Center, Easter Seals, Autism Therapeutic School. Let's see. This one doesn't have a name, Jay. item 8J, which doesn't have a name associated with it, so we'll have to, the contract is in there. Innovation, is that what it is? Innovation Academy, okay. Then Northern Illinois Academy Sequel School, the Economowoc Development Training Center, the Streamwood Behavioral Health System, the Walter Lawson Children's Home, the Willow Glen Academy, and the Legacy Charter School Amendment to Contract and the Galapagos Charter School Amendment to Contract. Other consent items including the Freedom of Information Act. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Dr. Harner. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Mr. Rollins.
7F.
7F. Any others?
I have a couple.
Okay. Go ahead.
7E.
7E. Okay.
Returning contract, I need to pull P and Q.
C, well, your first one was C?
No, P and Q.
Oh, P and
So
Q.
that's
Oh,
the
okay.
charter.
P and Q, okay. Okay. I will have the coordinator then call the roll on the consent items not pulled.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
I'll take a motion and a second to approve item 7E, which is the contracts under 10,000.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Dr. Harner. Questions or discussion?
I have a question.
Okay.
So under the Buck Institute, it looks like we're invoicing Alignment Rockford for the total cost of that. So have we paid already and then it's going to be to us?
We didn't hear the last part of your question.
Have we paid and then we're invoicing for them to reimburse us? Or are we invoicing them on behalf of Buck Institute?
I couldn't understand what you said in there back.
Mr. Lewis, can you answer that?
Mrs. Jackson, Alignment Rockford has actually billed District 205 to continue the work that they've been doing on behalf of the school system. So we actually have an invoice in hand. This is just to pay Alignment Rockford as we have like we did last year.
Repeat that, Mr. Lewis.
He said, I'll try to rephrase it. He said that the Alignment Rockford has invoiced the district for the $70,000. That is the amount that was paid to them for their work last year and will, as the work going on in the future, so that this is our payment to them for this coming year. Correct? Any other, go ahead.
This is for professional development. What does the $70,000 have to do with the $8,900?
I'm not,
Looks like a professional development opportunity. I'm assuming it was for teachers, maybe. It's college and career department.
we're not sure what you're talking about. Anybody, can anyone figure out which, is that, oh, the Buck,
$10,000.
okay,
Oh, Buck Institute.
yeah.
For professional development, and underneath it says invoicing Alignment Rockford for total cost. So my question was,
Mr. Carson can.
We're gonna have Dave Carson come up and talk. Okay,
Thank you.
so speak loudly, so she can.
Sure, I'll try to answer the questions as best I can, Ms. Jackson. Alignment Rockford used the Emerging Opportunities Funds that they were granted through RADEC to reimburse us for the expense of providing the project-based learning training provided by the Buck Institute. Does that pertain, am I providing the information to answer your question?
So the district is paying Buck. Alignment is reimbursing the district for what the district is paying Buck.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions under 7E? If not, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the contracts under 10,000.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
I'll now take a motion then and a second to approve item 7F, which is purchase orders, Auburn High School tennis court refurbishment.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by somebody down there, Tim Rollins, Mr. Rollins, okay? Any questions or discussions? Mr. Rollins.
Yeah, I just thought it was worth discussing, just because, for one thing, this showed up in the paper about a week ago. So it's my understanding that we own the land under the Auburn tennis courts, that at some point in the past, we entered into an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, with the Park District, allowing them to use that land. In exchange, they'd build the tennis courts, they'd maintain the tennis courts, and allow our students to use them. And I guess I've got a couple of questions. So it appears that they didn't maintain the tennis courts, and I guess that's one question. And now we're being asked to contribute to the maintenance of those tennis courts. That's one question I've got. Another question I've got is, I got the impression from the newspaper article that what's being done right now is sort of a temporary fix, and that there may be some more expensive things that have to be done down the road. I guess I want to know whether that's the case, and what we're going to be asked to do if that is the case. And this is a situation. Guilford might be a completely different situation, but with Auburn, what is the usage of the Auburn tennis courts, and would it actually make more sense for us to just take those in-house and back, if the Park District can't maintain them, which apparently it can't, whether we'd be better off just taking them back in-house and just having them for use for our own kids?
Mr. Schmidt?
In your first question there, yes, this is a temporary fix that we have. We have specialized at Crack and Field, specialized contractor to go out there and seal this, who's approved for tennis courts. For the long term, that's what we're working in right now, is with the intergovernmental agreement with the Park District, and these are some of the discussions that we're going to have with them of the long-term use of this, either by the Park District or by us. We have a meeting set up with Mr. Dempke to work in this. For the IGA, we have outside legal counsel working on this IGA for the facilities use. So that will be one of the topics that we'll discuss out there, is if the Park District wants to continue the IGA moving forward, when we create the new IGA and maintain the property, then they're going to have to pretty much fix the whole thing, which is going to be a couple $100,000. If not, we'll probably be in the same situation next year with repairing it, and it might be beyond repair next year. So that's some of the things we're working on with the IGA. There is a lot of use with the tennis team out there at Auburn right now, and actually they'd use it for a couple on some of the PE stations that they also use it for too.
Do you have any idea what the usage is? Whether we're the ones that mostly use it? Do we almost entirely use the Auburn tennis courts?
I don't have, the exact percentages of that. Through the school day, pretty much we predominantly use it throughout the school day and for practices. What the Park District does out there on the weekends or in the summer, I really don't know how much they use it. I just don't have that data. We can definitely get that if that's something that.
Okay. Well, I understand it needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed for this season, and this is not, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of money. So, I don't object to doing this, but I do think it has to be done in the context of sorting out some of these larger questions.
I had a question. Is it true that the Auburn kids, the courts are unusable for this year, and they would have to be bused to Jefferson for?
Right now, that's where they're practicing.
They're practicing at Jefferson. Okay, all right. Okay. Any other questions?
I have one, Ken.
Okay, sure.
The IGA, it looks like we're going to cut half. Is that outlined in the IGA that we split the cost with the Park District? I don't know. That might have been asked and answered.
Okay.
The prior IGA that was with the Park District has been terminated in order to negotiate a new IGA. The prior IGA agreement did specify that the Park District would repair and maintain but that has since been terminated.
When?
It was effective July 1, 2014.
And it was terminated so that we could negotiate the new IGA?
Well, it was terminated as a result of the change policy, and then the policy was amended to allow time to negotiate with the Park District.
So the policy was amended to allow time to negotiate with the Park District?
That's correct.
And that's what's taking place now?
Yes.
So why is it in effect if it's been amended? I guess, clear that up, please. So it's been amended to allow us time to negotiate. What was the amendment to keep that IGA in place and come up with a new one, or no?
No. The board policy was amended in relationship to the facility use policy.
Okay.
Mrs. McCullough?
Except for we also voted on allowing the park districts that they would not have, I can't remember the exact vote that we did, but it was that they would not have to follow that part of the policy until January. So from July to December, they're not part of that policy. So why would they not be responsible for the upkeep under the first IGA?
Because that IGA was terminated.
So if it was terminated, yet they're still operating under that IGA for other items, are they not?
No.
Where there is no charge for items that we had decided previously there would be no charge. I thought all those, it was too difficult to determine, and so we were going to continue until we had a new IGA and agreement in January. I thought they were continuing with what they were originally doing, so I misunderstood when I voted on that.
We had to issue, when the board policy was changing, we had to issue the notice of termination of all other agreements, which is what we did, and we issued that effective July 1. And that had, a lot of the various agreements with the Park District had significant notice periods of up to 90 days, or, so there were a lot of different agreements. Some really had no expiration period at all. So we did have to issue that notice, and so right now, what you could say is that the Park District isn't under any other obligation, although we could go back and argue that they violated that agreement.
Any other questions?
Well, I do. So what did we vote on then? Because I do recall the conversation, exactly as Board Member McCullough just stated. So what exactly did we vote on then? Because I thought it was just that, to keep their agreement in place until January.
No, it was to continue to allow them to operate under the old agreement, allowing administration to waive. I'm sorry, not the old agreement, the old policy. So allowing the administration to waive costs and continue down that way, but not with other agreements. Once you've issued the notice of termination and the effective date, that's done.
Okay. So my understanding, Mr. Schmidt, is that you're asking for approval of $12,675 to cover half the cost of the repairs, which will be a temporary fix.
That is correct.
All right. Okay, I'll have the coordinator call the roll then on item 7F, purchase orders for the Auburn High School tennis court refurbishment.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Can we do these two together? Ms. Jackson, is it all right with you if we do both the charter amendments together?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the Legacy and Galapagos amendments to the contract?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor, second by Dr. Harner. Questions and discussion?
What are the amendments?
These are amendments that were requested by the Illinois State Board of Education. The State Board of Education wanted a mechanism to resolve minor disputes included within the contract, so the amendment indicates that we would try to negotiate in order to resolve any minor dispute, but if that can't be resolved, then we would use the other contractual mechanisms to resolve disputes, which would include withholding payment or looking at terminating the charters. The other amendment that the State Board of Education had recommended was to clarify in the student transfer procedures and the cost allowance for that. So if they transfer mid-semester, we recoup those costs. If they, or vice versa, if they transfer into the charter before the quarterly payment or after the quarterly payment, we would adjust and make sure that we captured it on a day-by-day basis.
Mr. Rollins?
They also add, and I don't know where this or why, but I assume this was requested by somebody, they add a sibling preference provision to both of them?
That always was in there.
Why is it in the amendment then?
We restated that whole clause area rather than just, and rewrote the clause, the entire paragraph versus just a section of it for clarity.
Any other questions then on the charter amendments to the contract? If not, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the Legacy and Galapagos Charter School amendments.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
We are now at the closed session consent agenda items, including the following items: resolution to notice to remedy for employee BC, resolution notice to remedy for employee JS. Item 10C was pulled by administration. 10D is the appointment of LaToya McIntosh as a 10-month assistant principal. And E is the appointment of Allison Lewis as a 10-month assistant principal. I believe those appointments are West and Eisenhower, I believe. The HR organizational report and addendum, and the following closed session consent items for student discipline. The following students are expelled for the entire 2014-15 school year: WGD1 and DOG2, and the 10-day suspension is affirmed for the following student: JDC3. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Dr. Harner. Are there any items that board members would like to have pulled for separate consideration? Mrs. Powers.
10D, like dog, please.
Okay. I would like to have 10B pulled. Any other items? I will then have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items not pulled.
Ms. Jackson?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had you guys on mute. I was trying to pull
Okay.
because I wasn't there, so I couldn't hear you. Pulled 10 what?
10B and D were pulled. Did you have one you'd like to have pulled?
Yeah, I'm not going to vote on any of them because I was absent from closed session, so.
Okay. Okay.
11, and then whatever else wasn't pulled out of 10.
So do we need to pull all those then?
She can just abstain.
You can just abstain in those votes then.
Oh, okay.
Okay, all right. Okay. So we'll have the coordinator call the roll on the items not pulled, which were 10B and 10D.
Ms. Jackson?
Abstain.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 abstain.
I'll now take a motion and second to approve the item 10B, the resolution notice to remedy for employee JS.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor, second by Mr. Rollins. There is no discussion. I'll have the coordinator call the roll on item 10B.
Ms. Jackson?
Abstain.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Abstain.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses and 2 abstain.
I'll now take a motion and a second to approve the 10D, which is the appointment of Latoya McIntosh as a 10-month assistant principal.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Dr. Harner. No discussion. I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of 10D.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
No.
Ms. Jackson?
Abstain.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstain.
Thank you. The next agenda item is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
Thank you, Mr. Scrivano. Wanted to share that in the next 6 months, we're going to be spending a great deal of time preparing for a new 5-year strategic plan. We have the culmination of Visualize 2015, and we'll be moving into Readiness 2020, our new 5-year plan that will involve 60 community members. What I really like about the format is that it will take place 1 month in 1 month increments, so there's time for community feedback in between each step. The first big event will be over 20 people coming to our district for what we call a system assessment on September 24th through the 26th. Over 20 schools and all district departments will be visited. Moving forward, we will have a data retreat, vision retreat, set the direction in the months of October, November, and December. Ultimately, we'll finalize the plan in January, and the board can anticipate in January and February moving towards board approval and into the spring for action planning. So it's an exciting time for our district to not only renew priorities and possibly set some additional priorities, we will hopefully also really focus on a limited number of objectives moving forward so that we can do the best we can possibly do as a district to increase student achievement and improve all aspects of our district. So we look forward to a robust community conversation as well as some great feedback and dialogue from the board as we move forward on this process. Thank you, Mr. Scrivano.
Next is our committee reports, which I don't believe the committees have met. Do you want to give the new dates and times for your next meetings? Education?
Education Committee has not met, but we will be in this room on Monday, September 8th. We have 3 items currently on our agenda. They are the following reports, one on honors and gifted, one on the secondary course proposals, and a full report on the summer school programs.
Operations Committee, Mr. Rollins?
Operations Committee also has not met, and we will be meeting in this room on Tuesday, September 2nd at 5:30 p.m.
Great, thank you. We are now on to action items, which we already covered the Community Foundation earlier, so we'll move on to B, which is the IGA, which is Intergovernmental Agreement Alternative Learning Opportunities Program, ALOP, fiscal year 15, that Ms. Heide Carter presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Ms. McCulloch?
I just think it would be good to have is Ms. Heide Carter here? No, Mr. Vosberg. Somebody can talk about ALOP, and this was actually reported at Ed Committee, so.
Okay. Mr. Vosberg?
Sure. Mrs. Heide Carter is left, so I'll pinch hit for her. This is an agreement with actually it's an agreement with the area schools districts in Boone and Winnebago County. I think there's 8 total districts. They've had this partnership. The 7 other districts have been in a co-op with alternative learning placements with the ROE since 1998, and they've had conversations with us and allowed us to join pending board approval. This ALOP, which is, again, a co-op of services with the regional office as the governing body for 60 seats of alt ed programming, which is obviously providing the service for our students, but doing it in a fiscal manner that's better long-term for our district, because the funding, after year 1, the funding comes from state aid. So we pay, for the first year, we pay for each seat, $3,500 per seat, and then in subsequent years, the funding will come directly from the state in ADA reimbursements.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Vosberg on the ALOP?
I have a couple.
Okay.
Have the students been identified yet that will get this opportunity, or no? These are just available seats?
We haven't identified any students for this particular program, no.
Hopefully,
Different from what's at the regional state schools?
how is that different from the regional state schools?
Safe schools.
Oh, safe schools, okay.
Yeah.
Funding, really the difference is the funding mechanism. The regional safe schools, we are billed a daily rate anytime we assign a student to the program. In this model, we're paying for the seats in advance, and then the funding is again through ADA in subsequent years. That's the biggest difference. It's all run through the ROE with the same director, Dave Lund, who was here earlier but has left.
Okay.
Okay, so ideally then, what students should enroll in this program?
This is just another option of alt ed programming. So any student that is not meeting district standards or having difficulties in a traditional environment would be included and could use this program as an option.
Okay, will students, they can go there voluntarily, but will students be sent there involuntarily?
Yes, they could go voluntarily or be sent based on violating the code of conduct.
Okay.
Can you repeat that last part about the code of conduct?
They could be sent, if they violate the code of conduct, we do have an opportunity to send students to alternative programming.
Yeah. And that's my concern with many of the alternative programs that are put in place as an alternative. And so then what we do as an organization is we use them when a child violates the code of conduct. So I guess we should be cognizant of that because I looked at what it says. It looks like they're going to do some learning opportunities for the students. I guess it'd be a program for students who aren't making it in a traditional setting. So we need to be careful that those seats aren't taken away because we use them in lieu of expulsion and placing kids on a CPA.
Okay. Mrs. Powers, you had a question or comment?
I guess my comment would be that from what I understand from 2 of the high school principals, that it's taken them a couple of years now to understand kind of a profile, if you will, of which of their students would thrive at ILC. And so they've done a good job of keeping track of and checking in on their students and working with the director over there to understand kind of which students, after they get referred, show up and how's that working, so that they can adjust on their end and make sure that they're sending, like I said, the right profile of student into that environment. And so I guess that I'm hoping that we've got that same flexibility with these seats so that it's not just a violation of code of conduct, that then principals can go and visit this facility, can understand what kind of students are going to thrive there, and then they can work with their staff to be able to send kids there and again have the same success that they're having 3 years later with ILC. So
I hope that we don't just fill those seats with code of conduct violators and that we are allowing principals to be able to, again, kind of ramp up to learning how this environment is going to work for which one of their kids.
That's a great observation, and so we have talked extensively with our principals about being proactive and identifying students early that may benefit from these programs and not waiting for kids to fall through the cracks and commit some infractions that may limit their options. So that's a great observation, and we're working with our principals on that.
Ms. Jackson, did you have another question?
I did. So how can kids go enter and exit? Is it there's exit criteria? Is it set up like ILC and the other one, Fit for Life?
Enter and exit the program, is it similar to ILC and Fit for Life? That was the question, right? Was that your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's similar.
Okay, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the ALOP Alternative Learning Opportunities Program for fiscal year 14.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Dr. Harner?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 no.
Thank you. We are now on to new and other business, and we have one item right now, and that's Mr. Lewis's item on Linda Long Consulting Agreement.
Good evening. As you all know, back in 2009, we actually started implementing the SunGuard, it's called Enterprise Resource Planning Tool, so the entire gamut for SunGuard, which includes a student component as well as a financial component. Since that implementation, we've had approximately 6 different project managers assisting us, and they had different philosophical approaches as to how data should flow through the system, and very little attention has been given to report writing that would ultimately help the organization become more efficient. So we did put an FTE in the budget for FY15 to hire another report writer. You all approved under 10,000 contract earlier this year. Mrs. Long came in and did a phenomenal job for us in a very short period of time with correcting some canned reports that were inaccurate, and also building some reports to move the organization further along to have us become more efficient. We're proposing to bring her back for an additional $20,000 inclusive of reimbursable related expenditures to allow her to get specific in finance. We see some opportunity long-term, actually even in the short term, to get more efficient and become an even more leaner organization, and that's why this contract is before you this evening.
Mr. Lewis, what was the salary for the budgeted position that's being filled?
I'm going to take a stab. I can't remember right off the cuff, Mrs. Jackson, but as I recall, that position was, I think, $50,000 salary, so with benefits, you're talking $75,000 to $80,000.
Okay, and so you brought Miss, is it Long, and she came in July. She's coming back in October. Will she be coming back again, and again, and again?
That is absolutely not our intention, Mrs. Jackson. But again, this is, in our opinion, the most cost-effective way to get the reports that we need out of the system in the interim without adding full-time labor cost. So again, that's why it's before you all this evening.
Right, it'll be cost-effective if we don't have to continue to bring her back multiple times. So we'll already be at what, $30,000 with this individual in about, what, 6 months?
That would be, that
That's the concern that I have.
yes, ma'am.
And so you guys have looked long-term at this to ensure that we're just not going to pay what we would pay someone if we were to hire it.
Well, if we hire another person, to hire someone who has the SunGuard expertise and knows where all the data is in the enterprise system to create reports for us, I could assure you someone with that amount of expertise would cost us more than $50,000. This is just the most cost-effective, cost-efficient way to get the reports out of the system. We don't have any power users of SunGuard that understand the full database and scope of the system. This is somebody who knows the system inside and out and can come in and hit the ground running to produce what we need.
Right, and so my question is, we don't have that someone. So is it going to be more cost effective to have someone rather than to bring a consultant in multiple times? If we're already bringing her in twice at $30,000, we need to bring her in over the. I'm concerned with legacy costs as well, and that's my question. I'm understanding as administration that you all have looked at that, and what you're telling me is that won't happen.
Well, if you're asking if I'm saying without fail that this will be the last contract with Mrs. Long, I would certainly not go that far and say that. But given the needs of the organization right now, I think this is the most prudent thing for us to do. While she is here in October, part of what she's going to do is spend time with the report writer that we have on staff to hopefully provide them some professional development while they're giving us the reports that we need out of the system.
Okay, is there a question? I have a question about the termination date. Is that supposed to be 15 or 14?
I didn't hear your question, I'm sorry.
We think there might be a typo in the year termination part of the contract. Is it supposed to be 15 or 14, 2014 or 2015?
No, it'll be 2014. That'll be calendar year 2014.
All right, okay. Mr. Connor, you had a question? No. Well, or Mr. Rollins?
So the term in the contract that's attached is for 1 month. It's from July 1st, 2014 to July 31st, 2014, which is a month that's actually already over. Is that the correct term for the contract?
No, sir, that is inaccurate. It should be October.
But it will be a 1-month contract, or you're saying that the beginning date is correct, but the termination date is October 30th, 2014?
October 31st, yes.
And this is just on a first reading, so can we get that corrected by the time it comes to the board for decision?
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Connor.
My question is more about the work this individual will do. Is there any overlap with the current staff that does the Cognos reporting?
Mr. Reisman, is that going to be you?
Yeah, we do have one person who's full-time on the report writing, and then one person for the business side that works on report development and just fulfilling user needs on a day-to-day basis. This goes above and beyond that. Part of the reason that I feel like we need someone, again, more familiar with the SunGuard is because we did have to originally hire someone that didn't have experience, and Linda will be able to come in and validate some of the reports that we've created and make some of those edits that we found that were inaccurate in some of the reports we had from with our current report writer.
I think I understand. The one thing I'd ask is when this is brought back that it's clear any relationship between the reports that are being produced and if there's any overlap or like reuse, anything like that. I'd like. I don't need the list of reports, just basically saying, confirming that there's no overlap. You've looked at the reports.
Definitely.
Yeah, those kinds of questions. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? If not, this will come. Yes, go ahead.
I have one last thing. Under Appendix B, when it talks about her reimbursable expenses, I see an amount not to exceed $19.99, and it looks like round trip airfare, car rental, gasoline, hotel tolls, meals. Will we know anything by the time that comes back that will be broken down by line items on those expenses?
We will hold Mrs. Long in confines with the regulation internal when it comes to travel and reimbursement, Mrs. Jackson.
I know that. I see that. My question was, will they be broken down? Because on some we know what meals are, some we know what the hotel costs. So that was the question.
We will make a concerted effort to get you some very accurate numbers on exactly what the travel expense and the reimbursables will be. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So this will be presented for approval at our September 9th board meeting for a vote. Is there any other new business?
I need to ask a question.
Okay.
Okay, this is going to be really business. It was recently brought to my attention. Did we lose some of our 21st century grant money for the program?
Dr. Wolf is here, so I'm going to have him answer that. Hang on one second.
Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Jackson. I heard all of the question except what you want to know about the 21st Century Grant.
All right, so
We lose some of the grant money. So, for example, it's my understanding that 21st Century isn't taking place at Lewis Lemon, and that's one of the schools that is in our empowerment zone. So, did we lose grant money?
We did not lose any grant funding. All of the grants that we had ended. And because of the federal government issues relative to passing a budget, they haven't since 2008, they sent word to the State Board of Education about the funds going forward that would be available under 21st Century, which forced our State Board to release the RFP for the FY15 grants. Maggie Kemple, we've applied for the maximum award in the maximum grants, which is $600,000 a year each in each of 3 grants. The state is anticipating awarding those grants in November of this year, and Maggie Kemple and Penny Schaefer have been working with partners. I was at that meeting so that we can launch as quickly as possible to serve students.
Okay, what schools were impacted? I was told Lewis Lemon was. Is that true?
To be very honest, there were 18 schools last year, and I cannot tell you those. I can get that report, and we've applied for 13 schools in the upcoming grants. We included priority schools, the high schools. We try to maximize the points that were available in the RFP, and I can get the list for both.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wolf.
I think somebody else had their line on. Ms. Powers?
2 meetings ago, well, I guess only at the last board meeting, committee structures and committees of the board was pulled as an agenda item. It was added to the off-site retreat. We never got to that. It's not on tonight's agenda. When and where will we address the committees of the board?
I have that on the agenda for the October Saturday retreat.
Is there a reason we're waiting so long? Why can't we have it at a board meeting? Why are we waiting for another retreat? And if we're going to do that, then I would ask that administration gives the board the first 2 hours for us to conduct business of the board. Because administration always comes in, does what they need to do, and then I feel like the business of the board is getting lost. So
Yeah, I would say if the board
I'm
wants
not-
to have I think it should be a special meeting, that's my opinion, which we could hold one sooner than October if we wanted to do that, if that's the wishes of the board.
Well, this request has been out there since April, that we've been talking about, I've been talking about specifically the Community Input Committee and the Accountability
Right.
Committee. And I would like to be able to give those community members either notice to come here and present, or that those committees have been dissolved. I just think out of respect for them, the sooner we act, the better.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any?
Anybody else want to comment on that?
I do, and
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Mr. Serrano, I believe that I called you Ken a couple of times,
Okay.
so I want to apologize
You
for that.
you could call me whatever. I'll respond.
Well, I need to be professional. So,
Okay.
Mr. Serrano, I would like to have the discussion about committees, and I do echo that if it's going to be put on a Saturday agenda, that we move that up so it is done first.
Okay.
And then I also talked about there was unfinished business at the last retreat where we really didn't get through the board administration, like the trust
Sure.
exercise or whatever that exercise that we did.
Yes.
So are you going to be polling us for availability? in October?
We have a scheduled meeting, October 20-something, 25th or whatever, this last Saturday in October. That's already scheduled. Yeah. And that item is on the agenda. I've already talked to our facilitator about that item.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Rollins?
Yeah, I'm just following up on what Mrs. Powers was talking about. I would just ask that before we have the discussion, or as part of the discussion, that we invite at least the chairs of the committees to come to talk to the board about what their committees have been doing, and so that we get some sense of what they have been doing, what they haven't been doing, so we can make a better informed decision about whether that's something that's worth continuing or not.
Okay. Any other comment, Ms. Powers?
Well, there's unfinished business from the retreat in terms of the Code of Conduct Guideline review. We never got to that at the end of the meeting.
You're right.
So I just think that there's 3 items right there that I'd rather have a special
You'd
meeting.
rather not delay.
That's just my sense.
Definitely important things.
The other thing is, in terms of the request log that is added to the superintendent's weekly report, we're killing a lot of trees with that, and I'm just wondering if the board would be willing to, if you are a requester of one of those items that has been closed, if you could let Mrs. Fromm know, and we could just archive items that the owner has agreed that they have substantially received the information they were looking for. And if the owner feels like they haven't received it, then sit down and have a conversation and figure out how we, reopen it or whatever. But there are some items on there that are clearly closed, done, we can archive. I think there's others that, for me anyway, and some of my requests need to be revisited. So I'm wondering what the rest of the board feels about that kind of approach.
Comments? Sounds reasonable to me.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay, then the last thing is, last school year, we had a lot of inclement weather days. I'm wondering if administration has or would be willing to look at a late start model and what, if at all, if that is a possibility for this, because a lot of times, once you get to 9:30, 10 o'clock, the ice is melted or, the weather is not as bad and we're losing an entire day. And so I'm just wondering if we have ever evaluated a late start and if it's just too difficult to execute and even if we were to do it, only with certain, elementary or secondary, but, what does administration feel about delayed start?
Mrs. Powers, this is something we did discuss at Cabinet last year, and Mr. Schmidt's concern after conferring with Mr. Wilson from Transportation was that when we do with the way our transportation is sequenced together with over 20,000 students being transported, the difficulty of adjusting those schedules posed a pretty significant challenge. So we would have to have further discussion about that. But our initial conversation led us to believe that was going to be so logistically difficult to reconfigure. And in some cases, it wouldn't work because of the way the routes are staggered. That kind of by the time we got everybody there, we'd have to turn around and get everybody back was kind of part of the discussion. Mr. Schmidt, anything that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, a lot of that is we stagger our systems like Dr. Jared said, so we'll start there, we'll do a route, we'll pick them up start at 7:30 or 7:15, drop them off at 8 o'clock, then that bus will go on and pick up another route, or start picking up the students, then drop them off at either 9 or 9:30. When you sit there and push everything back there, we can't have, if you do a late school time, they all can't be at the same time. It's just impossible unless we double the amount of buses we have. So then when you sit there and stagger that back there, it just creates a little bit of havoc.
So could we have some sort of communication plan that maybe at the school level, PTAs or PTOs or whatever, or, some way to help communicate that? Because, for parents who You don't find out sometimes till 6 in the morning, and then, here you are 4 or 5 hours later, and it's like, I had to take a day off of work, or I had to employ my contingency plan to have somebody be with my kids when, I just think that we could do a better job of maybe communicating that, it ultimately, yes, it's in the best interest in the safety of the students, but there are also just own it. We've got logistics or operational issues that don't allow us to be able to have the flexibility that some of the smaller districts have. So I just think, and again, last year was a pretty cruel winter, but, they're talking about another one coming up, and I had quite a few community members saying, what about late start? Harlem does it, or, and so I would like, for us to maybe be a little bit more vocal about the fact that it's not convenient, but nonetheless, it's the best we can do. Or so if the community or the communication team can figure out a way to silk purse out of the sow's ear, great, because I would like a better message communicated.
Interesting that you brought that up. I was thinking today, about the heat on the first day of school, and it's like in an 8-month period of time, we went from 35 below zero chill temperatures 8 months ago to heat indexes of 100 degrees. And it's only in the Midwest where that would happen. So anyway, all good points. I wanted to remind board members that one of the things we did talk about at the retreat was that when you have consent item questions, that we've kind of talked to Dr. Jarrett about this, and that we kind of agreed on if we could get the questions to him by noon on the day of the board meeting, he will do his best to get those assigned to the appropriate administrative person so that they are prepared and we can get a good solid answers on any consent item questions that you might have. So keep that in mind. Any other new business or other business for tonight?
Well, I don't recall that, Mr. Serrano, getting questions to the superintendent by noon of what day?
No, of the board meeting day. We did not discuss the deadline, but we discussed the issue of bringing questions on consent items before the night of the board meeting, whenever possible, so that proper preparation can be done to answer our questions. And so we kind of talked about, I talked with Dr. Jarrett about trying to pick a time, and we kind of said by noon on the day of the board meeting would be great if we could do that.
And
okay.
You and Dr. Jarrett picked that time
Yes.
of noon on the day. Did other board members get that memo, or no? You just
No, I just was, there was no memo. We discussed this at the agenda planning meeting, so, I'm just throwing it out there. If that doesn't seem to work, let me know.
Well, I just wanted to be clear by memo. I know you sent that information out to other board members.
No, I haven't.
This is the first time hearing the news.
Right, no,
Okay.
right. This was a new business item that I wanted to bring up for tonight, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any other business for tonight?
Motion to adjourn?
I knew you were going to say that. Second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 8:16. Thank you.